And before I really start, I want to make a few remarks. Yeah, the first one, I'm talking as a film scholar, so I'm a little bit from the edges of the field maybe as well. And I have, what I'm going to present today is actually part of a much longer argument that I developed elsewhere in this journal, which is going to appear, a special issue of Deleuze and Guattari, studies on Deleuze and Guattari and the psychedelic revival. And it will come out in October, I hope, and it will feature articles not only by me, by a lot of scholars writing on, for instance, Vincent Moon. If anyone of you has seen the performance yesterday, so there's one on Vincent Moon, and there's one on the importance of schizoanalysis for psychedelic-assisted therapy, and a lot of other kind of hopefully useful concepts to think with along the psychedelic revival. And another preliminary remark is that one of the things that triggered my intervention today is a visit to the Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas. Anyone has been there? Are familiar with it? It's really very, very, very beautiful. And Rothko is, of course, famous for his monochromatic one-color paintings, and usually in bright colors. They have always taken me in. So this was on my list of things to do. And in October, I got a chance to visit the chapel, and it was very, very psychedelic in the sense that, there is nothing almost, but you are transported into different realms. And this sober aesthetics, I was surprised to see it was almost black, so no color, but the black and white was so mind revealing that I thought this is something to work on, So that's really beyond semantics, probably, because there's nothing to say. So, and then what I will focus my talk on today is this film, which is almost a Rothko experience. It's a film from 1968 by Philippe Garrel. It's called Le Révélateur, The Revealer, and I will show you the beginning 2 minutes of the film. It is a film shot in black and white, only 3 characters and no sound, so it's silence. So just let's see. Can you play it? Or yeah, or maybe the light. Yeah, for now it's good to have no lights. Yeah. Can we put the lights back on? Okay. So imagine doing this in circumstances as cold as in this room, or even during COVID, where I watched this film with my students in a very dark theater, the windows open, and 90 minutes going through this. This is a little bit, yeah, I think you get a sense of what might happen or what was happening. And also what's interesting that afterwards, after we screened the film, we had a long talk about what happened to us, what we saw and what we experienced, what we thought, what we felt, what we heard. So in that sense, it was, somehow a mind-revealing or psychedelic hallucinatory almost experience. But I want to track back and try to say a few things about, how can we think about this, because it's all these experiences are very often so difficult to talk about. And one of the, of course, original sources to talk about the aesthetics of the psychedelic experience is, of course, our classic Aldous Huxley. And one of the things that he says about his masculine experiences, what he saw is that he really actually thought that his experience as a aesthetic experience of the event really actually gave him access to the non-human otherness of the human universe. And I think connecting to the non-human otherness, the things we don't normally see or experience or feel, is an important clue and something interesting to take with us. And then another idea that is important, that runs through or at the background of my talk, is this quote from Deleuze and Guattari, who have talked about the psychedelic experience very clearly, explicitly, but also many other concepts of their work are quite psychedelic. But what they say is that if the experimentation with drugs have left its mark on everyone, even the non-users, it is because it changed the perceptive coordinates of space-time and introduced us to a universe of micro-perceptions. And one of the ways in which Deleuze is arguing about this, entering into micro-perceptions, the non-human otherness, is through his fascination for cinema. Because he sees cinema really as a tool for thinking and having access to, again, the non-human otherness of the universe. So he's not at all a realist. He's not at all interested in the representational qualities of cinema, where we can have access to, what's there out there being represented on screen. He really argues for something else that is happening that does change our perception of how we experience the world. And then he says two interesting things. He talks about, in his cinema books, he wrote two books about cinema, one called The Movement Image, the other The Time Image. And he argues there that he talks about the psychedelic experience in relation to what he calls the perception image, so the basic way of getting access to seeing. And he says that the psychedelic experience is actually a perception in the midst of things. We are in the midst, we're not in front looking at, but we are, in this perceptive world. And the other thing that he says about the psychedelic experience is that it actually it is a sense of intensity. And the way he describes intensity is these moments where we really experience things at the limit, what he called the limit of perception. And what he means by that is that it's really the moment where there is something we can still sense, but it's almost immediately doubled with something that is no longer makes sense. So the immanent and the transcendent are the words that he uses, something that we can still experience. And at that moment where it's moving into something else is what is the intensity of the limits of perception. So I'm interested in filmmakers. Not only I focus today on Garel, but there are many other filmmakers and artists who have their different ways of bringing us to the limits of perception. So just to say a few more things about Deleuze's cinema books. In The Movement Image, he actually says that if we have perception, there are actually two. Perception itself moves between two limit poles. One is the most innermost pole, the subjective experience, where things happen to us that are not visible to others, but this is the moment of abstract lyricism, dreams, hallucinations. It's really the innermost experiences, and he calls this this subjective inner pole of the perception image, what we can perceive. And he actually refers to the French school of what he calls liquid cinema. La Talente by Jean Vigo is an example of these. Well, we have dreamy, surreal kind of images. And that is what cinema and technology, media technology can do. It can bring us to those dimensions. And the other pole is a very objective pole, also something bringing us to images that we cannot see with our bare eyes. It's really the camera from nowhere. And here he gives the example of Dziga Verto's Man with the movie camera, where the camera literally moves into the world, into the objective world, giving us images almost this gaseous, molecular perception of what the world consists of, which we normally cannot see. And so this is very particular of what film, but also other media today. Deleuze was writing his books in the 1980s, really before the digital revolution, but his concepts, I think, are still very useful and can be transposed and transferred to our world. And just to remind ourselves, also Marshall McLuhan was, of course, thinking about this relationship between technology and psychedelics, because in his famous Playboy interview in 1969, he was asked about the flower power movements of his time, and he then said, "The attraction to hallucinogenic drugs is a means of achieving empathy with our penetrating electric environment, an outward environment that in itself is a drugless inner trip." So McLuhan also made these kind of similar arguments, really connecting technology, media technology, to psychedelics, and a sort of mutual going back and forth, one trying to express the other and the other trying to make understandable where we are moving as human beings, because perception, the field of perception, has changed and is changing constantly, profoundly. And at this moment, it is changing at such a rapid speed that we need all kind of means to even try to think beyond our human confines, because, just think of all the artificial intelligence that has been around but is moving up to greater speeds. So that's just a reminder. I go back to Deleuze and now to the film, of which you just saw a clip. In his second book on cinema, he talks about this film, or not about this film, about this filmmaker, but not this film, Philippe Garrel's work. And he actually argues that in Garrel's work, we see always three characters, a man, a woman, and a child. And usually his films are in black and white, and this film is even without any sound. So there is something very abstract going on. And Deleuze actually makes an argument that what we see here is actually, it's not a real man and a real woman and a real child. It's really, he calls it luminous dusts and flecks and gestures and particles, but they form what the genesis, he says, of what could be considered as the Holy Trinity of the man, woman, and child, not literally embodied and fleshed, but as an idea of generating the world. And in all his films, actually, many of his characters are struggling with hallucinogenics, but it's not always or usually not the topic of the film. So in this film, what is very striking is that these three characters actually performed to a very abstract level, even to the level where actually everything is only circles, you know, the mise en scène is full of circles, or triangles, or squares and rectangles. So there is this almost geometric abstraction going on, which points to that holy trinity of the man, woman, and child. And I will just show you a few more. I made some slides where you can see the more of the circling and squaring movements. The child very often runs around, makes a circle around the parents or one of the parents. You see him there as well around the tree, walking in circles. That's all. Or the man himself moves around his own axis in a circle. And when I was taking the film stills, the algorithm described this scene as a bird in the dark. So I didn't recognize it even as a human figure, which is telling. And this is, you know, machine vision going on and moving us into, Deleuze would say, a becoming animal. Yeah? And here are a few more. And I also made some of the triangle more visible. So here we see them. So these are just some of the scenes where we have the triangles, and here are more squares. Okay, so besides these triangles, squares, and circles, what we also see is linear movements of characters running, like here, and this expresses really a sense of dread. So the film is shot in the woods of München in '68. And everywhere there is still the feeling and the fear of the war that was not so long ago, still lingering in the woods, which is somehow picked up by the characters. And also what we feel here is, but you have to know that it's '68, it's after the May revolutions of '68, and Garel was very disappointed by what happened, and he just left and went with his characters to make this film. So there is a lot of disappointment. Here we see them crawling through the grass. Another this image was also recognized as mammals in the grass. So there is again a becoming animal going on. And there is a lot of sense of dread and persecution, but there is also a sense of longing, loss, and care. So the parents, you can see them a little bit in the background, trying to reach the child, but they never are able to. So the child becomes this almost unattainable sense of meaning, maybe, or everything turns around this. And the child in the end is the only one surviving, we think, we don't know. There is not really a narrative going on, but we have all these feelings that come across. And if we think about the triangle of the man, woman, and child, what we also see, and we see it in this image, for instance, is that there is another triangle going on, which is the triangle between the characters, the camera, the filmmaker, and us, the audience. And the child sometimes waves at the filmmaker, at the camera, sometimes directly looks at us. So we have that relation established there. So there is another triangle there. And if we take that one step further, we can, of course, also go into the abstraction and the symbolism of alchemy, which I think is another very interesting field where we have a lot of resonances with. And in alchemy, the triangle in alchemy, this triangle is actually body, mind, and soul, or spirit and soul. And if you combine all these in alchemy, you actually get the philosopher's stone. And here I just want to, and of course the philosopher's stone is a reference to psychedelics as well. It has been very often compared to this. So I'm also interested in finding out, okay, what would that mean? Why, how? I have no idea, but maybe there are some clues here. So I just read you the recipe to find the Philosopher's Stone, which is from the Rosicrucians 1550 recipe. Make a circle out of a man and a woman. Derive from it a square, and from the square a triangle. Make a circle and you will have the Philosopher's Stone. And actually, sometimes this is also referred to as the child of the philosophers. So we have here this tripling of triangles, circles, and squares that somehow maybe point towards this entrance into an esoteric mystery, into the circle. In a lot of Garel's films, the circle is really the esoteric circle in which the magic happens or might happen. And I think a lot of his work refers to these dimensions of abstractions that we can find at the limit of perception. What Deleuze in the end argues about the cinema of Garel is that in all its abstraction, in all its non-humanness, it is actually arguing for restoration or restore in a belief of the world. These are the words that he uses in connection to this type of cinema. Now we can think about how that would translate, what that would mean. I think it somehow has to do with this effort of going to the limits of perception where things end, but where maybe also new things open up, and where we can see the world anew and make new connections also to all kind of non-human or otherness and entities. So I think that's my last. Oh, this is still another image from the Rothko Chapel. This is in front of the chapel, which has a broken obelisk with a lot of triangles from Barrett Newman. And the building over there is the inside that I showed at the beginning. So I want to end it here. Thank you very much.